Hi, and welcome to the latest in our Sustainable Futures Career Conversations podcast. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Paul Toyne for a conversation today about his career in sustainability and some of the lessons that might be available on the back of that. So, without any further ado, Paul, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and wonderful to be here. It's a real delight. So my name is Paul Toyne. I guess I've had a long career exclusive to sustainable development, specialising really in the built environment. But yeah, very happy to tell my story. Wonderful. And hopefully there'll be some insights.
Fantastic. Let's take you back. Your sort of early career was very much in that conservation side, and I think it's the first time I've had the conversation with somebody who's got a butterfly named after them. So just tell us the story about that and your early career.
Well, you've definitely done your homework. So I grew up in West London, and as a child I was very fortunate enough to be able to roam the towpath of River Thames, going to areas like Richmond Park, and I got fascinated by wildlife. So much so that I started a collection of amphibians, mainly newts and toads. Okay. And I used to breed them, I used to keep them, and they'd go on family holidays to the Isle of Wight, and they used to go around the garden, neighbours' gardens, finding aphids and various other things to feed them. But anyway, I had an interest in nature conservation. But unfortunately, and it's different now, I didn't really get to study and understand the environment and nature until I studied A-level biology at school. And then things all kind of fell into place. So I wasn't a particularly good student, I have to confess, but I did scrape through with 3 science A-levels, and I went to study environmental science at the then Leicester Polytechnic, which is now De Montfort University. Anyhow, fast track. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, I did my third year dissertation on habitat requirements of amphibians. Yeah. And then was fortunate enough to be offered a studentship to study at Imperial College for a PhD. And after a lot of umming and ahhing, and I actually said no to the actual subject, okay, which was epidemiology. But I was then offered an opportunity to work at the Forestry Commission and do some research with them. So I selected the understanding the ecology of a bird of prey called the goshawk, yep, which is a very large version of a sparrowhawk, was extremely rare and had been reintroduced into Britain. And I set about studying that. But whilst I was there, and this is at Imperial College, I stumbled across the Society for Scientific Exploration. And as a young man, I've always been fascinated by wanting to travel and see the world. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to put knowledge together with a journey? And why don't I go off and run some expeditions? So funny enough, I went up to BirdLife International, yes, and the now chair of Natural England was Tony Juniper. And there, back in the day, he was the parrot conservation officer. Okay. So we set up this idea that I would go off to Ecuador to study neotropical parrots. However, I had to fundraise and assemble a team, get permissions from the local, the national government and the local authorities down in southern Ecuador. But anyhow, we did all that. And actually, a series of very successful scientific expeditions then resulted. We called it Parrots in Peril. I was the director, the research director. And a number of things happened. We discovered new species to science. And there's lots of stories about how all that happened. Everything from the first record of a very tall emergent rainforest tree, which hadn't been found in Ecuador previously, through to the discovery of new species of butterflies, one of which, yes, is named after me. I didn't ask it to be named after me, but the experts in Gainesville in Florida, the entomologists, actually named it. But we found quite a few. Right. And if I may, if we've got time, there's another story, which is actually quite inspiring for what actually happened afterwards. But we found one of the butterflies that I'd found. It was actually described to science by an epidemiologist over in Warsaw in Poland. And I then moved on to work for WWF as a conservation officer. And the idea was then to raise funds for the conservation of that area where the butterfly was found. So we had a competition to name the butterfly. And The winner was a grandmother who put in the entry for her granddaughter, a girl called Isabel. And so Isabel was, let me think, 7 or 8 years of age.
Yes.
And so it made the news. We did a nice piece for regional news about Isabel's butterfly. And if you go onto the internet, you will find that piece of news, and you'll see me as a young man meeting Isabel, who was absolutely delightful, and the actress Wendy Craig at a place called Zion House in Isleworth in West London, which was a butterfly house. So we did this whole piece to camera around the conservation of butterflies. Isabel had a butterfly, but funny enough, about 12 years later, she contacted me. She was about to do her gap year. She decided to study at Durham University, been inspired by the butterfly all her life, and wanted to go back and find the butterfly and ask for my help. So I didn't go with her, but she went, and guess what? She found it. And so it was a lovely story. And I've caught up with Isabel once or twice over the years, and it's really exciting to see how people can be inspired by things that you do and that connection back to nature.
And that early interest in that sort of sector and those things around you, really being able to take that forward into a career is quite a special thing, I think. So, yeah.
But it's also understanding that the natural world is threatened. So one other aspect to those expeditions was we were British ecologists and conservation biologists working in an extremely biodiverse area of the world.
Yes.
But unfortunately, an Anglo-Norwegian company was gold mining there,
Right.
and actually breaking the local laws.
Right.
And as a result of that, the local miners were coming in and using mercury to extract the gold. And you've probably heard of the expression "mad as a hatter."
Yes.
And that was because the hat makers in Luton used to rub mercury to stiffen the top hats, the felt hats, and they all got ill because of that absorption of mercury. So we led a campaign to actually stop that happening, and for the company to withdraw from the national park.
Fantastic. And was that part of the WWF?
No, it was well before
that. So that's given you that passion for that conservation and the biodiversity, the amazing differences that there are in these places in the world. You took that on into that conservation role within WWF. Just talk about that and then how that took your sort of career forward.
Yeah, if I may, Paul, I think that one of the key takeaways from that is using science and evidence to help inform decisions. So without us, I actually got a master's student to do the analysis of the dust and water and the contamination levels from mercury. So we actually had something to go to government and say this is a public health issue. So when you think about it, the career that I've had, into WWF and elsewhere, has always been about outcomes and using evidence to drive outcomes that are hopefully for the betterment of us, of society, and for the natural world. And so with WWF, with my background of being an ecologist, understanding nature, and some of the campaigning techniques I'd used, it was quite a natural fit. It was my first actual professional job, and I worked as a conservation officer and specialising in species conservation, and that took me to places like the Russian Far East to look at conservation programs for the Amur tiger, or the so-called Siberian tiger, and start to understand how we need to influence policy to protect areas, national parks and such like, but also from the other issues of human pressure, which can be hunting, and in particular for the tiger, the use of their tiger parts for traditional Chinese medicine.
Fantastic. So, I mean, the recent developments in terms of that biodiversity net gain and the whole movement towards 30% is obviously a significant move in that direction. How do you see that in terms of the protocols that are coming through in terms of protecting that biodiversity? Is it enough?
Well, I mean, funny enough, back then we were looking at what was called conservation hotspots. And this was the science then was saying if we conserve different types of habitats and ecosystems throughout the world which are thriving and rich in biodiversity, then we've got a good chance of protecting the very fabric of what we as humans need for our own civilization. So I am excited and well, excited may not be the right word, but I am pleased that we have made advances, and the understanding of natural capital and the significance of it to us has been made. But the key challenge is, I think, is that when you look at the planetary boundaries that we have, the trends are really all going still in the wrong direction. And we're in that area now where the alarm bells are all ringing. Yes. And we need to be really careful that we manage the next few years to try and at least give ourselves and the planet the maximum chance to actually restore its ecosystem services.
Well, I think we'll come back to that, but I just want to follow that train of the career and the move then that you made from the conservation role and not-for-profit NGO role into the private sector and into that sort of slightly different environment. How did that come about? What was the story behind that?
So whilst I was working at WWF, I was approached by some people in my network who were setting up a business, a consultancy. And this was a time when corporate social responsibility was just starting to emerge. So we set up a consultancy which still trades today. It's called Article 13. And Jane Fiona Cumming over there is running it. And she was one of those partners. And I took a non-exec role and used my networks to help opportunities for business development. And then after 5-6 year career at WWF, I switched across to be a director of Article 13 and help grow that business. And we were providing guidance and support to both governments and businesses on how they could best respond to the CSR agenda. And again, through either reporting, programs that were driving outcomes that would be good. And in those days, we were working on issues like carbon management and did a lot of work around corporate governance. And setting up businesses so that they understood what was material in terms of impacts to their business and how they could manage their stakeholders and report progress against those material issues.
I'm interested there in terms of that move, almost from a campaigning environment at WWF to an advisory support role. Was it a good and easy move to make? Was it a relatively natural one, or did it feel like a moving almost gamekeeper to poacher environment?
Not at all, actually, because if you understand the issues, whether you're campaigning for that change or whether you're working internally, either as a consultant advisor or as a change agent within a business, to help manage those risks and see the opportunities. Yeah. So I think it's the same sides of the coin, really. You're just looking at it through a slightly different lens.
Okay. Interesting. So just
well, what happened was Article 13. What do? I did maybe four years or so, and then I felt the need to actually be the change agent within a business, and I was thinking where I could make the biggest difference. Right. And I decided that the built environment would be a really good home for me. And the reason for that is the pressures of urbanisation. So across the world, we've got more and more people living in cities, which creates an opportunity. The opportunity is to design our systems, so our food production, our resources flows, etc., our transport systems or whatever, so that we can maximise efficiencies and reduce the footprint that then goes back in the natural environment. So I saw that as a natural fit, and where, given my background in understanding the conservation and what we need to do to preserve, or at least better manage biodiversity, I thought that would fit quite nicely. So I was employed by Lendlease to be their first sustainability director for their construction business. And at that time, some of their projects were the regeneration of the Salford Quays up near Manchester for the new home to the BBC, the Olympic Village for the soon-to-be 2012 Olympic Games. And I got a real insight in buildings. And I used that to explore how I could change the performance against a number of really key issues for the business, and was quite delighted. I mean, then this responded really well. We had a fantastic management team. I was part of that executive team, and we drove some really great change and some, again, evidence-based results. Yeah, and we kept it simple, and it worked.
I'm interested in the skills evolution that you've had to go through in order to make those changes, and what skills you feel you've had to consciously work on to make the changes that you have and be as effective as you have, in particularly in those moves that you've made where you're influencing a different audience.
So my top tip here, Paul, is really simple. It's understand the psychology of people. It's absolutely essential. Mm-hmm. Really understanding and being able to see the perspective from different sets of people. What are their drivers? And what I learned, actually, and it came a lot from my consulting career, I learned actually you really need to understand where the why is. Mm-hmm. Why are you motivated to do something? Yes. And that can be from personal gain. It can be because it's the right thing to do. It can be for a whole variety of different things. But if you can get some agreement or understand or get people to understand why it matters and they see it from their point of view, people very rarely argue with their own data. So I spent a lot of my time getting people to reveal what the why was, own it, and then help deliver it.
Yes, working with people rather than against
them. Yeah, I mean, I never told people what to do. Mm.
I
just helped facilitate a conversation that resulted in them working out what the right answer was. Occasionally, I might say to them, I don't think that's the right idea. Maybe we should consider this. Yes. Prodded and pushed. But if it then becomes their idea, then you've got far more chance of that. You've done that engagement, they own it, and then let's help them deliver it.
Yes, super. So we're back to the career. So Lend-Lease, and you've remained in that sort of built environment space since then, essentially, and evolved in different roles there. Talk to me about the sort of next opportunities that you've sort of taken advantage of.
So I was interested. I had a UK role with Lend-Lease, and then I went to work for the design engineering consultancy WSP. There I had a group role, so I was looking at all of the businesses, and I had some corporate reporting responsibilities. And I also got involved in some of the delivery, but less so. But the one area that I did interact with was the development of the idea of future cities. At that time, people were talking about smart cities, but understanding how design engineering services, if fitted together correctly, could act to develop what I would call an integrator role. And we saw some of that work coming through from Scandinavia, California, South Africa, bits in the UK. And we merged that all together to try and put together a compelling argument for how WSP could provide a more holistic view around cities. And when I look back at my formative years and my training, when you look at what ecology really is, it's the study of species and their interaction with their natural environment. And then when we look at what we do today about people, it's understanding people and what they need from their local environment, which tends to be cities. And it goes back to that whole point about how we can redesign or design completely new areas where people need to live in a way that maximizes those outcomes in terms of quality of life, but takes away those pressures that are on the natural environment.
It is interesting that social element of sustainability has gained in importance in the last decade or so. I think for exactly that reason, without recognising that we are part of that broader sustainability agenda, nothing's going to happen. We need to bring people with us as well as the sort of the technical elements.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people might look at my career or know me and say, well, Paul, works on climate change and it's all about the environment. But actually, at Lend-Lease, I chaired the not-for-profit charity called Be On Site, and one of our goals was to get over 2,500 socially excluded people into the workforce through the trades, and how we could support that. And then when I left WSP got sold and became a Canadian business. I went to work for Balfour Beatty, and I moved into the world of infrastructure. And actually, if I was to say what was my legacy at Balfour Beatty, it would have been the development of something called Involved. And that was a community investment program whereby I got all the Balfour Beatty businesses, particularly here in the UK, to understand what their social and economic footprint was. And we worked with the New Economics Foundation, and it was unbelievable. From a business that didn't think it had an impact, it was one of the largest businesses in the UK creating social value. So we could come up with a statement that, if you invest in Balfour Beatty, X pennies of that money actually go back into that local community, supporting micro enterprises and other good causes. So, I'm really proud of the work that I've also done on the social side of things. Yes. And you're quite right, it's equally important. If we can't demonstrate prosperity in the future for people, that gives them improvements and betterment in their life at the same time as managing the environment, then it's very difficult.
Yes. So let's bring it up to date now in terms of where you are now and what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm currently working for Grimshaw. Grimshaw are a global architectural and urban design practice. I lead, so my role is to lead the practice, and they're a global practice. We have studios across from LA, New York, through to Auckland, Melbourne, Sydney. And we do some really quite exciting work, both in infrastructure and in buildings. And I'm there to help support architects and designers, challenging and pushing them to try and be as innovative as possible, thinking about everything from the whole challenge around carbon through to adaptation and resilience, and then into areas we've talked about around nature and biodiversity. It's fascinating because across the world, we're in different markets. We've got different sets of clients, different policy, regulatory environments. But the one thing I would say is, regardless of where we're operating, what we tend to find is who we're working with, everybody wants to do the right thing. We want to maximize the impact that we possibly can. And of course, there are constraints about, innovation and what's happening in the local markets in terms of coming through with materials and various other things. Yeah. But it's really quite an exciting time to be working in this space.
And is it a conscious choice to move into a role which is around the design side of it rather than the implementation side? Do you feel there's a sort of opportunity to go earlier on in the process to design out the issues that we've created for ourselves?
So when I put together this award-winning program for Lend-Lease back in all those years ago, we had one element which was all about design. Mm-hmm. And although that design may be novated to us, we might have a design and build project, but getting to some kind of certification standard like BREEAM back in those days, I said, was really important. And today, through the conversation I've mentioned design a few times. And I said back then, design is at the heart of everything. Good design, which derives the best outcomes possible and reduces the impacts, is the way forward. That's what we need. And whether you're designing, buildings or infrastructure, and the connectiveness that is between the vertical development and infrastructure is absolutely key. And understanding the systems that are at play and how we can change them to create co-benefits that get delivered through that. And I think that's where the thinking is now. It has to be systems thinking. We need to tie together these strands and actually being at the heart of it, right at the beginning, advising clients as well about their aspirations and their objectives. And I spend a lot of time doing that, actually giving the client the opportunity to think about the art of what might be possible and to challenge them and get them to challenge the supply chain, the architects, the engineers, the contractors, to actually deliver and raise the bar in terms of their performance.
So talk about, we sort of look back a lot so far. Let's look forward a little bit in terms of what's around the corner for sustainability and how to make a real impact. Where do you see the sort of opportunities for future sustainability advancements coming from, that innovation in sustainability?
Well, the holy grail, in my view, is to get into a space which I would call restorative or regenerative. And that means you hear a lot about things about net biodiversity gain or net zero carbon. And I think we need to be really honest with ourselves. Getting to net is not going to be sufficient. Yeah, net is kind of like in a balancing equation where we're still doing less harm, but we're not actually restoring. So the program of work that I've got with Grimshaw is all about regenerative design and thinking about how, today you walked into this building, Wouldn't it be amazing if in the future we all walk into buildings and as a very result of being in that building, we feel better? Better in terms of our mental health, maybe better in terms of the active participation, how we use the building. There's lots of different things that we can and should be doing that can create health and well-being outcomes. And then we can move into the environment, water management, being energy positive or carbon positive. But we need to see it being positive, and we need to be far more articulate and actually understanding how that then delivers the benefits that actually are really important
and
to
more
us.
ambitious. It's about ambition, isn't it? To look beyond just not doing any harm, but actually doing good as part of the normal business process.
Yeah, we need to get up into being positive.
Yes. We're sort of running out of time, unfortunately. It's gone very quickly. But I'm interested, we need people to do that. And I always say, without the right people doing the right work, there's all the words are just words. They're not going to take us anywhere. So I'm interested in your sort of snippets of advice to give to those people coming through into sustainability careers about how to enhance that, how to make the most of the passion that you have to have coming to the space.
Sure, yeah. I mean, obviously, passion, enthusiasm, and being smart are three great ingredients. But the other thing that I would say is, don't expect to be having the best job in the world, making that change immediately. Yeah. Think about the building blocks. Get the right experience. Get that. Volunteer. Be inquisitive, and actually change. Move around and learn. And don't be afraid about doing that. When I look at the decisions I made and people thought, working in the environment all those years ago, you'll never get a job. And now, in terms of my career, I've leapfrogged quite a lot of, people who went to university with me who are now doing what they're doing. So I would say build a portfolio of knowledge and play to your strengths. Understand what you're really interested in and carve a career out of, in that direction.
View about where you want to be rather than it needing to be here and now.
Yeah, I think when I look at it, everybody now is in some degree of urgency, and we all want to have the best possible job immediately. I think there's no substitute for experience, and also being multidisciplinary, and actually understanding more about how things work rather than necessarily be that expert in one particular area.
Fantastic advice. Thank you, Paul. That's been really interesting. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Some great tips and advice, as well as that positive call to arms, which I think is really important at the moment. So thank you, Paul. Really appreciate it and enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. And thank you for watching.